Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network here at BNP Media, welcoming you to another Prepared Foods dive into strategies in the field of food and beverage product development. Today, we have a special presentation on cheese. Cheese has always been a favorite food in America and throughout the world. Cheese always scores at or near the top of the American consumer's favorite savory flavors, and numbers tell the tale. The USDA recently reported that cheese consumption continues to break records and that per capita cheese consumption has nearly doubled since 1980. To that end, we're visiting today with the brain trust of the Wisconsin Dairy Co-op, Foremost Farms USA. We'll be discussing ways to enhance savory and even sweet items with the flavors of America's favorite savory flavor, cheese. And we'll look at using everything from powerful soft ripened cheeses such as brie and camembert or blue cheeses to aged classics such as Gouda, Parmigiano, and even good old cheddar, Swiss, and mozzarella. Katie Kolping-Gustafson, the Senior Director of Product Innovation and Technology, is going to be leading our team today. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, David. Thanks for having us.
Hey, it's our pleasure. Katie, how would you like to introduce us to the rest of the group, please?
Sure. So today joining me, we've got Matt Zimbrick, who's a principal scientist on my team. We've got Dana McCurdy and Greg Reeder, who are senior scientists on my team. Bethany Johnson, who is a dairy product technologist on our team. And not joining us today is a gentleman named Scott Navarre. He's a master cheesemaker for cheddar American types for our team as well.
He's not here. You're keeping him chained in the cheese cave, right?
Very, very busy. Always in the cheddar mines.
There it is, cheddar mines. I like that. The number and the variety of artisan cheeses and cheesemakers in the U.S. continues to increase, and it's great for the cheese and dairy industry. But so too is the evergreen consumer demand for the comfort and flavor of the classic and traditional cheeses. So let's sort that out first. What's trending in the world of cheese these days?
Hi, David. I will take this question.
All right.
So, you know that Americans love a variety of food options, and there are cheeses that are like think Brie, Gouda, Asiago, Gruyere, and lots of other cheeses that have gained and kind of like almost like in a way revived their popularity in the US. But like you mentioned, Americans still also favor that like familiar traditional cheese that provides that nice warm comfort feeling when you eat it and consistency. So think along the lines of our cheddars, Monterey Jack, Brick, Swiss, in mozzarella especially. We've also seen an upward trend in things like Munster. So overall, our demand is it's continually increasing for these classic kind of domestic cheeses.
Well, I noticed that about Munster. It was a popular cheese when I was a kid many years ago, and it seemed to have faded. And then in the past year or two, we've seen it popping up everywhere, including in my refrigerator. So when it comes to using cheese in food formulations, what is it that would make one cheese more popular than another?
Oh, okay. So along those lines, certain types of cheeses are popular mostly because they're versatile and they can be used in multiple applications. So think like along the lines of, like our deli cheeses and so you've got like sliced, grated, shredded cheese. These are purchased mainly by home consumers, but most cheese isn't actually purchased that way. It's actually purchased more as an ingredient in an application for things like, pizza, our pasta dishes, or like food service applications. So this is then where our classics like cheddar dominate for, very, very important reasons, because again, they're consistent, they're reliable, and they're flavorful. They also have, like we've seen across, a bunch of different food applications in restaurants and, in the stores, they've got a variety of applications. And then they also pair well with a bunch of different foods and beverages that fit that like kind of traditional American palate.
I see what you mean. I know that cheddar and mozzarella are still the number one cheese that consumers, I guess numbers tie for number one cheeses that the consumers still enjoy. So is cheddar or mozzarella or any of these basic cheeses, are they enough to keep consumers engaged with cheese? Bethany, how about you?
Yeah, consumers do love choices, but luckily there's a lot more options available within these classic cheese categories than you might realize. So take American cheddar, for example. It's not just one product.
Oh,
It's a category. There are lots of ages, textures, meltability, flavors, and even colors within that category. And each one is really versatile and can be used in a variety of different recipes as an ingredient.
so what are some ways that product makers can actually take advantage of the versatility of some of these cheese choices?
There are lots of fun ways to incorporate these cheeses, like pizza, for example. Adding Monterey Jack or Brick to your pizza blend can create different flavors and textures than just using plain mozzarella. They're
Hmm.
both higher fat and more buttery than a traditional mozzarella, which can give it a new flavor profile. You can also use cheddar in a pizza blend. That'll change the flavor profile while still letting you have that excellent stretch, melt, and browning of a mozzarella. And cheddar can also add a pop of color that adds novelty to the appearance. You can also
Um,
create dishes with flavors from other cuisines like Asian or Mexican inspired pizzas, or use blends of cheeses in quesadillas or on pizzas, or even in mac and cheese. One category that's growing is Latin American cheeses like asadero, Oaxaca, quesadilla. And these are wonderful ingredients to experiment with. They're traditionally used in melting applications or to top dishes, but they can be used in fresh applications too, like salads for texture and flavor.
oh, wow. A word we hear used in conjunction with European cheeses these days is terroir, like wine. Do American cheeses have that same quality?
Absolutely. Using cheddar for an example again, a Wisconsin cheddar, East Coast cheddar, and West Coast cheddar are going to all share some basic characteristics, but are going to have a lot of different flavor nuances that reflect where they come from. That's because of the diet of the cows, seasonality of the milk, the microflora of the cheese plants where they're produced, and also just regional tastes are different.
Hmm.
Um, and each individual dairy farm can also affect that flavor. Cheese should have a really good flavor with functionality and good mouthfeel as well, but food scientists know it's equally important to have cheese that melts, browns, stretches, and cooks the way that it should in every dish that it's used for. And people eat with their eyes first. So cheese needs to look like you want to eat it, like you want to dig right in. So, for example, when you have a pizza, a grilled cheese, or mac and cheese, you really want that gooey, stretchy goodness that's going to flow really well. But also, if you have a room temperature application or cold application, like a salad, you want a flavorful, creamy cheese that's going to stand up against the other ingredients you're using it in and enhance the flavor and the texture of the dish.
Okay. So, if you can share some more about the technical aspects of working with a cheese formulation to customize it for a specific dish or client. Matt, you've been pretty quiet. How about you take that one?
Sure, I'll take that one. Many cheeses have a standard identity, and it's mostly based on moisture and fat content. If a cheese isn't made according to its standard identity, it can't be labeled that cheese. Like if the cheddar isn't 39% moisture, it can't be sold as cheddar.
That's
Um,
specific, huh?
yeah, but
Oh,
the
wow.
magic comes in when we actually slight vary the microbial culture and some of the cheese making process, because that's responsible for making the different thousands of different cheeses around the world.
Wow.
Um, the other thing is cheese is made of milk, which is made up of water, fat, protein, minerals, and lactose. So the cheesemaker also adds other ingredients like cultures, enzymes, and salt. And the ratio of these components, fat, moisture, minerals, lactose, also affect how the cheese will function in different applications.
Oh,
So for example, the moisture content in mozzarella roughly is like half of the cheese, while Parmesan, it's only about a third. That's might seem a lot of moisture in mozzarella, but if you tried to melt a Parmesan, it wouldn't have that gooey melt, flow, and stretch like a mozzarella because you need that moisture in the cheese to make it function on a pizza and a pasta dish. Yeah,
yeah.
these are both common cheeses that have very different applications due to their respective properties. Mozzarella has a very mild, simple, clean, milky flavor and is great for melting on pizzas, lasagnas, where Parmesan is used to add the flavor impact because it has less moisture. And also, for standard of identity, it has to be aged over 10 months to make it be called a Parmesan cheese.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into the nuances that makes every cheese unique in terms of both the organoleptics and the functionality. Go ahead, Matt. You're on a roll.
Sure, yeah. Different cultures make the cheese browned certain way. They do this by reducing the amount and type of sugar remaining in the cheeses. This is very critical for a pizza topping mozzarella. In order to brown golden brown, sugar is very important. But the culture also determines the acidity of the cheese, which is a very important for flavor and texture. The window for pH acidity of the cheese is a very small and is very critical part to make a great stretchy, gooey, melting mozzarella, for example. But also pizza, the pH of cottage cheese and feta is so low, it doesn't flow on pizza. So if you would top a pizza with these, it would pretty much sit there and just soften because of that pH.
Right. You often see in some recipes to substitute cottage cheese for ricotta in a lasagna, and you really do get a very different texture at the end of that. So, and what's fascinating is cultures are just one aspect of a cheese, as you've pointed out. So, Greg, I'm going to put you to work here. Let's talk about some of the other aspects of cheese that affect the organoleptics.
Yeah, minerals in cheese can also prevent proper melting. Having too much calcium in the cheese can cause that. By removing some calcium during the cheese make, the body of cheese remains soft and it flows better when melted. With all the characteristics in mind, it is critical to mass the right cheese with the right application. This is how cheesemakers can create something new and exciting from standard staple cheeses like mozzarella, provolone, and cheddar. Also, adjustments can be made in fat to protein ratios or in the microbial structure used to ferment the milk. Culture can be manipulated to customize browning capabilities, stretch, and flavor production. And all of these can also affect the ability for the respective cheeses to age too.
Okay. And, in talking about aging, we don't normally think of these classic cheeses like cheddar or mozzarella in terms of aging, but in fact, aged versions of these cheeses are out there, and they do seem to add a great deal of difference. So tell us more about aging.
So absolutely, as cheese ages, its characteristics can change, but there's a difference between deliberate aging for specific flavor notes and textures and aging in storage. It's necessary to predict what a cheese will do when a cheesemaker uses it. Take cheddar, for example. Its optimum salt, acidity, and moisture and fat to make cheddar will age well. Aged cheddar can be a great experience, but a high moisture mozzarella does not age well. It'll be difficult to shred and will be runny and burn when melted, which is less than ideal.
No kidding. So, well, now we've covered traditional cheeses. How are domestic cheesemakers acknowledging the inroads that the exotic European and other cheeses have been making into the American culinary landscape? Katie, do you want to, you've been silent. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Oh, sure. I'll take a crack at this one. Okay. We really do have domestic versions of a lot of the European cheeses that are out there. Things like your Parmesan, your Asiago, your Brie. Actually, a number of those are even made right here in Wisconsin. But that said, too, there's frankly a very healthy artisan cheese market in the United States as well. You can find just about any kind of cheese. Some people are getting very, very creative with some new US versions of old classics, if you will. But at the end of the day, really, most people are still reaching for the really comfortable classics, your cheddars and your mozzarellas, the things that we've grown up with, the things that we use day to day. They just really want that high quality cheese, and they need them to perform the way that we expect them, that they've been developed to perform.
Well, okay, so let's get down to the technical aspects. What are some of the ways to make them perform like that? That is, how do you tailor a cheese to perform the way a product maker wants it to?
Sure. Honestly, I think my team did a pretty good job of touching on a little bit of this earlier, but it really comes down to a deep understanding of food science. Most of us have backgrounds in food science or closely related fields. When you're dealing with these kinds of cheeses, you're tweaking your formula, you're tweaking your process, you're changing in very light ways the composition of your cheese. Matt touched on moisture and fat, some of these things. Greg touched on culture. You're touching on pH or minerals. All of these things, they're kind of integrated in a really complex matrix. It's all the same stuff, right? It's all the same milk. But as you change those little things using food science and your formula, you're changing the behavior, the flavor, the color, the ageability of your cheese, and again, people really bond over this. We bond over food anyway, but especially these cheeses, jokes if we're interested, but we do have a family friend here who's, they say they're a Wisconsin vegan. They don't consume any animal products except cheese because it's just that good.
Yeah, I like that. A Wisconsin vegan.
It's pretty funny,
You can't say that with New York or California cheeses. You can't say a California vegan because that's redundant. And you can't say a New York vegan because, so for pepperoni. So yeah, I like that. Wisconsin.
It's pretty fun stuff. But again, it really is though. It's understanding that these things are nutritious, that they're very limited in the number of ingredients that are in there. They're not a chemistry set, which is pretty great. It's just milk, culture, salt, basically. That's about it. You're getting a lot of good protein, you're getting healthy fat, you're getting amino acids. These are the kinds of things that incorporating these things into your dish, it just improves the quality of anything. And I think a lot of people recognize that, and that's why cheese is so beloved.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you mentioned the nutritious aspects. Give me a real quick, just like a handful of some of the nutrients that are in cheese that folks might not either be aware of or might have forgotten.
Well, it depends a little bit on the cheese, but you can get various vitamins and minerals. Sometimes there's more calcium, sometimes there's less. It depends on which cheese you're working with. Again, great protein sources. You can get some vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin B12, some, although that's more in yeast, believe it or not. That's why we do autolyze yeast on dishes sometimes. But again, it's really that what do we say? It's a complete source of protein, right? So there's no missing amino acids that are essential for your growth and development. That's why in plant-based diets, you got to have beans and rice because you need both. Cheese is already there. It's a whole kit and caboodle ready to roll. It's some of those things, I would say.
And I'm guessing it retains the vitamin D as well that you're getting from the milk.
Well, only if you fortified the milk before you made it. That's a fun fact. Vitamin D is not really naturally in milk.
I didn't know that.
No, it's fortified. And you can fortify it a number of ways. Old-fashioned way was to use UV light long ago. That's how you make it in your skin, actually. That's why you need to go out in the sun. But newer ways today, we actually fortify for fluid milk in the United States, utilizing a vitamin D vitamin source. So unless you're fortifying your milk before you make cheese, it's probably not a great source of vitamin D. Doesn't mean you shouldn't eat it, but just have it with a side of fortified milk.
There you go. Well, tell me this. Is the milk used in cheese making these days fortified milk or not usually?
I would say no. I could defer to my team, but no, you wouldn't typically fortify the milk. You bring it in and you want to use it as fresh as possible with as minimal processing as possible. It's important to have those proteins be intact and strong and not cooked, like if you think of an egg white, before you go and utilize this. So the less touching and the less work you do, the better. It's pasteurized. All milk in the United States cheese is pasteurized with some exceptions, and that has to do with how long you can age the cheese after. There's a lot of hurdles for that. But you pasteurize the milk and then you go and you culture it immediately and you make cheese out of it. And you do that as quickly as you can from farm into cheese, because otherwise you're starting to change the microbiological composition, some of the other chemical like pH. I shouldn't use the word chemical, that frightens people, but acidity, you're changing a little bit of the behavior and functionality of that milk. So no, we don't typically fortify that milk for that purpose.
Ah, well, that's good. That's interesting to know. I don't think a lot of people know that. So squeeze the cow, get the milk in, turn it into cheese. That's a very good window into how that happens, but it also tells us that it's fresh.
Yes, very, very fresh. And again, very, very old classic formula of fresh milk, culture, salt, cheese.
Wow. And I'm looking at the clock. We've almost run out of time, and here we've just really barely scratched the surface. Anything anybody wants to add? We got about 2 minutes before we gotta, say goodbye, but did we miss anything? So we'll have you guys.
I don't think we did. I just want to thank you.
Well,
I want to thank you so much for having us.
I want to hear more about cheese sometime. So can we have y'all back sometime, even one at a time in a group? Doesn't matter, because there's a whole lot more to discuss. It's America's favorite food, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. It was great to have y'all on, and I want to thank our audience for joining us. Again, I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network. And we were just visiting with Katie Colping Gustafson, Matt Zimbrick, Dana McCurdy, Greg Reeder, and Bethany Johnson from the Wisconsin Dairy Co-op Foremost Farms USA. You can find a whole lot more on cheese and any other topic of interest in food and beverage development right here at preparedfoods.com. So, until next time.